do you see the European landscape panning out over the next 5 to 10 years then, with the Euro breakup or slow grinding economic growth for the Northern Europeans without our pig nations ever becoming ever more indebted to the Troika and so experiencing falling standards of living?
Yeah. So Europe, I think, has got probably the broadest range of options of any of the major developed market regions, because there is huge potential within the European Union, huge potential. And no Eurosceptic can deny that if you see something like proper supply side reform, proper changes to financial flexibility and labour markets and the like, so that Europe looks in terms of structure and format, in terms of how its economies work, a little bit more like the US and the UK, there's a lot of catch-up potential in Europe, a huge amount. Now that's been the case at a few different times in history. You had that in the 1980s and certainly post-German reunification in the 1990s too. And there was periods of time when the European stock markets did fabulously well as a consequence. So that potential still exists. So here is the big debate, the big challenge for European policymakers. Can they not only put in place the necessary reforms and the necessary legislative changes to get to that nirvana of a more flexible supply-side driven Europe, but can they do that and also compromise sufficiently to ensure that some of the shorter-term economic stuff can be sorted out as well, i.e. can balance up some compromise from the creditor nations, compromising with Greece and other countries with debts in order to just reduce that tension and burden too. Now, if you can do that agreement, if you can do supply-side reform, then Europe is not just cheap, but has huge opportunities going forward, despite having some negatives in terms of longer-term demographics and whatever. There is still lots of opportunity in Europe and a wide range of scenarios. And I would be very hopeful that if you got those two things sorted out, Europe could do very well. But that's within the hands of the policymakers. And what I observe is the best companies within Europe are realising that they can't trust the policymakers. They may or may not do that. They may or may not see sense. And so consequently, they are making sure that they are not only enacting reforms at a company level to help ensure their survival and progress, but are also looking to other markets around the world for sales and profits.
Do you think the euro will collapse?
Personally, I don't think so, because I think the political driver overrides everything else. And as a consequence, you'll get to the economic compromise, which will allow it to continue. So I would be hopeful or would think that the euro will continue. But it is in the hands of the policymakers, and as always, we can see a wide range of scenarios there. But my personal take would be they believe in the political concept, and therefore ultimately, just as we've seen over the last year, policy has been loosened, ultimately quantitative easing is coming in. All of these things at the time were people in certain countries like Germany did not like the sound of it, did not want it to be implemented. But here we are finally, albeit a bit too late, we finally implemented it. And I think it'd be exactly the same with this compromise required to keep the euro project going forward. I think ultimately compromise will come. It will be a bit too late, and it will have volatility for the markets whilst they're thinking about these things. But it will ultimately come, and it will keep the euro moving forward.